Hi everyone, welcome to this very special Korg Pa5X webinar presented by none other than Mr. Steve Hubble from Korg UK. We had to pre-record this webinar because Steve does have an incredibly busy schedule, both with his playing commitments all around the UK and his busy teaching schedule in the teaching studio that he runs with his wife. But we managed to catch up with Steve for a day a couple of weeks ago, and we discussed some really exciting future plans. For example, Steve is going to be producing an exclusive range of Pa5X software for ourselves here at Keyboard World, and it was also agreed that Steve would become a regular contributor to Keyboard World magazine. While he was here, I asked him really nicely, would he be happy to sit and film a little webinar for us to pass on some of his personal hints and tips on the Pa5X. And in true Steve style, wasn't long before we had an hour or so of wonderful content, which we put together to create this webinar for you. So all you need to do is sit back, relax, enjoy, and I know you're going to learn something as well from the Pa5X master, Mr. Steve Hubble from Korg UK.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to this webinar. My name is Steve Hubble from Korg UK and Ireland, and it's great to be here with my old friend Paul Carman at the Keyboard World HQ, and very nice it's looking too, if I may say so. So yes, it's lovely to be here, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a tutorial, a few hints and tips on things that you can do with this wonderful instrument, the Korg Pa5X Professional Arranger keyboard. So what I thought we would do today is have a little chat about a style of music that features quite a lot in my shows. I play a lot of music, movie and film music, from some wonderful composers such as John Barry, Carl Jenkins, Ennio Morricone, John Williams, all these sorts of people. And very often people come and chat to me at the shows and ask me how I've set up certain sounds and certain styles. So I thought it'd be rather nice today to go through a few of these with you. So what we're going to do, we are going to edit one of the factory styles to create a style that you can use for all sorts of different pieces of music, because the same style will be suitable for lots and lots of them. So that's what we're going to do. Now, the style in question, we don't want a style that's got drums and bass and strumming guitars and all that sort of thing. We don't want that. We want something that is a lot more free for you to play than that. And therefore, we're going to use some of the freestyle styles that we have on Pa5X. Basically, any rhythm style with the letters FS after them are freestyle. And that means that there is no definite rhythm, okay? It's going to give you a nice backing and a nice bass, but there's no definite rhythm or timing to it. And that's the sort of thing that we want, okay? So we are going to start off with one of the freestyle styles, and that's a style in the movie and show category, and it's called Angel Voice. Okay, and I'm just going to give you a little indication of what that sounds like. I'm just going to play a chord here on the keyboard, and this is the Angel Voice style. And you can hear you've got a nice ethereal sort of sound there. You've got some nice string basses going on, and it's changing nicely and gently each time I change a chord. And that is the ideal style for what we're going to do. Okay. Now, for all those of you who aren't technically minded and prefer to just sit down and play, one of the really nice things about this keyboard is that all the styles and all the sounds straight out of the box without doing anything to them sound absolutely great. So you can just sit down and you can use that angel voice style just as it is, and things will sound really, really nice. But for those of you who like to do a bit of twiddling and fiddling with the sounds and the styles, then I'm going to show you how you can use some of the features on the instrument to make that sound and those styles even better. Okay, so we are going to start off first of all with the angel voice style. Now, it's important for us to know what exactly is going on in that style. So to do that, we are going to use one of the, in my opinion, the best features on Pa5X, and that is the mixer. Okay, we've got a wonderful mixer facility on here. If anybody has ever used a normal mixing desk, then you will be very familiar, because the one on here looks just like a proper mixing desk and it operates in exactly the same way. So it's brilliant. Now, there are two ways to get to the mixer. On the screen along the bottom, where you've got all your tabs along the bottom here, the fourth one along is mixer. We can press that, and then the screen changes, and that takes us to what we call the small mixer. And that is a small section of the screen showing you what's happening. And we've also got the players where the styles are still shown on the screen. Okay, now to do any changing, we need to go to the larger view, which is the large mixer. And to do that, we press this icon here on the right hand side, press that, and it changes, and there is the large mixer. Now, there is another way to access that. You can go to the menu button and you can press mixer, and it takes you to exactly the same place. So two ways to get there. Now, if anybody hasn't seen a mixer before, then they can look a bit complicated because there are lots of knobs, switches, buttons, sliders. But in actual fact, it's a lot simpler than it at first appears, because the knobs, switches and sliders are all arranged in columns, which are called strips. And if you look along the bottom here, you can see that each strip applies to a certain part of the keyboard. So the first strip on the right is the upper one. The next one to it is the upper two, the next one upper three, and so on and so forth. So each of these knobs and switches is just repeated over different sections of the keyboard. So there's not as many things going on as it first appears. Okay. Now, currently, we are showing on the screen the sounds, which are the upper 1, 2, 3, lower, and so on. But we are talking about the style. So we want to press this button on the right-hand corner of the screen and change that to style. And you can now see that the mixer display has changed, and it's now showing us the various parts of the style. Now, each style is made up of 8 individual parts, and they're labelled across the bottom of the screen. So the first part is the bass, the next part are the drums, next is percussion, which, although is similar to drums, will do a different thing. And then we have 5 separate accompaniment parts, and there is a different instrument assigned to each one of these. And those are the 8 parts that make up any of the styles. So if I get our style going again, there we are. Now, what you can do on here, you've got buttons one that says M and one that says S. And that stands for mute and solo. So you can actually listen to each part and see what it's doing by pressing the S button, which is the solo button. So if I press in the first strip, which is, we can see we've got movie strings, it tells us at the top that the sound is movie strings. I can press the S, the solo button, and we can just hear what those strings are doing, and that is the string bass sound. And that's following the chords as we change our chords. Let's switch that back off and put the whole style back on again. The next bit is the sound effects kit on the drum part, and if you solo that, you won't hear anything. And that is because that, on this particular style, will only play when we press one of the fill-ins. If I press a fill-in button, then you will hear just a little wind chime. That's all it's doing. Remember, there are no drums on this style, so it's just that. And if I solo the third part, which is the percussion, again, that will only work when we press the variation button. And that is, again giving you just a little cymbal, which is acting as a fill-in. So both the drums and the percussion parts of this style are just doing a fill-in. The next part is a sound called fresh breath. If we listen to that, that is that ethereal synthesizer type of sound playing in the background. Again, following our chords. The next one is a soprano voice. Now, if we solo that and listen, you won't hear anything, and that is because the soprano voice isn't on variation 1 of the instrument. That actually comes in, I think, on variation 2 or 3. So if we select one of those variations, then we should hear the soprano voice. There it is. And the next sound is French horns, and again we can solo that. You can just hear it's just doing a little single note there, following my chord in the background. If we select the strings, then we don't hear anything. That's because they don't play until variation 3. And on variation 3, that's what the strings are doing. And the oboe, I think you will find, is coming in on variation 4. Yeah? So each of those instruments are just doing a little bit on their own, but they combine together to make this rather full and lovely backing sound. So, yes, that style, just as it is absolutely fine. And you could use that to play lots of different tunes. But as I said, the purpose of this tutorial is for me to show you how I have changed that a little bit to make something that I think is even nicer, that fits in with the style of music that we're talking about. I'm thinking pieces of music such as Gabriel's Oboe, or Out of Africa, or Schindler's List, for example. And if you listen to the orchestra play, then in the main, the backing is largely made up of strings and probably French horns, okay? And you probably wouldn't have things like fresh breath and soprano voices. You might have them a little bit on some tunes, but certainly not all the way through. So I'm going to look at how we can modify this style, so we can make it, so we can use it for lots and lots of different pieces of music. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to change is that fresh breath sound. Now, just to remind you, there's the full style. You can hear the fresh breath there, which is very, very nice. But if you play lots and lots of tunes, that is going to become quite an obvious sound. And as I say, it's not perhaps as authentic as you would like. So the first thing we're going to do is change that fresh breath sound, and the sound I'm going to change it to is French horns. Okay, now it's a very simple job to do. We're on the mixer, we're on the style page. It's showing us that accompaniment 1 is fresh breath. Now I'm going to change that, and to change it I literally just press here on the screen on the picture, and it takes me to where the sound is coming from. It's a factory sound. It's on the strings and vocal section, page 8, fresh breath. There it is. I'm going to change that. I'm going to go to the brass section and page 2, and on here on the right hand side of the screen we have some wonderful French horns. So I'm going to choose French horn, and now when I play the style, the fresh breath will have gone. It's still playing the same notes, but the sound is different. It's now a French horn section. Which is much more authentic to the style of music that we're after. Again, I can solo that using the solo button, and we can listen to that just on its own. Now, the first thing I'm going to do with that is just turn its volume down just a little bit, probably to about 85, something like that, because it's a little bit too loud in comparison with the rest of the style. So now I've turned the volume down. That is nicer. You can just hear that in the background. Okay, so that's lovely. Now, I'm going to go to the big mixer now. Now, on the right-hand side, there are some tabs. We're on the main section at the moment. As you can see, that shows you what sound. It's got a picture of the sound. It's got the sound name. This here, right, left, or centre, that is moving the sound between the left and the right speakers. And as we can see, the French horns, which used to be the vocal sound, are panned to the right by 30 degrees. And that's fine. They can stay exactly where they are. That's fine. No problem. And then underneath that we have the volumes. Now, coming down to the tabs on the right-hand side, the first one we come to is EQ. Now, for those of you who have had stereo systems, hi-fi systems in the past, you will all remember, I'm sure, your tone controls. You had treble controls to make the sound a bit brighter, bass controls to make the sound a bit bass heavier, and that's exactly what EQ does. You've got high frequency at the top, which is like the treble control. You've got low frequency at the bottom, and you've also got a separate one which is medium or mid frequencies in the middle. And we can see how these have been set up. Now, these are all set up when you select the style. I haven't changed any of these, but you can see that in accompaniment 1, the bass frequency was turned up by +4, and that was because that suited that vocal sound that was originally on there. Now I want to change that, so I'm going to just tap it. It turns red. Then I can just simply use the wheel, and I'm going to put that back to normal. But what I am going to change now is the mid frequency, because on French horns a little bit of extra mid frequency is really good. So instead of the bass frequencies being +4, I've put that to 0, and I've moved the mid frequencies up to +5. And if you look at the other strips, the other columns that relates to the other instruments, you can see that they have all got settings that have been set within the style. So we'll leave all those as they are. Next one down, we're going to ignore for a minute because the next 3 buttons are all to do with effects. Now, effects are electronic things that you can add to sounds to change them and make them sound better. Now, for example, I'm sure we've all heard of reverb, which makes sound echo. Well, reverb is an effect, but we have lots of others. We have effects called delays, and we have compressors, and we have phasers, and each of these does a different thing. And I know that you've had these explained to you before in previous tutorials, and that's what the effects do. You can add them to any sound or any style, and they will make changes to whatever you've selected. Now, I'm going to ignore the insert effect for a little while because the main one is the next one down, which is master effect. So there we are. So when you select master effect, the screen changes again. Now, this is very interesting because on the Pa5X, you actually have 2 effects running simultaneously, effect A and effect B. And now, not every keyboard does this. On a lot of keyboards, you only have one set of effects, and your sounds and your styles all go through the one set of effects. But this keyboard, you've actually got 2 separate effects processors. So the one on the right-hand side, Master Effect B, is all to do with the sound, so we can ignore that. We're not bothered about that at this stage. We are interested in the one on the left-hand side, which is Master Effect A. And it's showing you 3 different effects. The first one is reverb, and it's set to reverb hall. The second one is currently an auto pan delay. And the third one is a room reverb, which is a different style of reverb. Now, these have all been set for you. Every style on the keyboard will have a set of effects that have been programmed for you. So each time you select a style, it will have what is considered to be the best possible combination of effects for that particular style. So in general, you never have to worry about these. But because we're going to be editing the style, then it gives us the opportunity to do a few changes. So while we're in this section, the first one I'm going to change is the reverb. So if I press the picture, it's showing that I'm on reverb hall. Now, I'm going to press where it says reverb hall and change that to reverb smooth hall. And if we look at the parameters down here, these are all things that affect the way that reverb works. And the only one I'm interested in here is the reverb time. And I'm going to tap on that, and I'm going to turn that up to 3 seconds. So the reverb effect will last for 3 seconds. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of that. Now, the other thing that affects the way a reverb sounds is what you can see written under here, wet, dry. Again, I know this has been explained to you in the past. Basically, that is the mixture between the wet, which is the name given to the reverb effect itself, and the dry, which is the standard sound with no reverb on. And the bigger the numbers here, the more reverb you're going to get and the less of the standard sound. Now, I tend to use this set to 2080. That's my normal go-to setting. Other people may have settings that they prefer, but that's what I use, so I'm going to leave that set on there. Now, we're going to go down to Effect 2. FX2. Now that is a stereo auto pan delay. Now some of these sounds on here are going to be using that, so I'm going to leave that well alone. But the third one down, which is reverb room, which is a different type of reverb, I don't want that. But what I do want is a different effect called chorus, which I want to add to the French horn section. So again, if I tap on here, I can now tap at the top where it says reverb room. And on the left-hand side of the screen, we have lots of different categories of effects. And the one that the chorus lives in is the modulator. So if I press modulator, and at the top left-hand side of the screen, we have stereo chorus. So I'm going to press that and exit out of there. And that is, you can now see that on here we now have the reverb smooth hall, which is the reverb I set. The delay we left alone, and the third effects has now changed to stereo chorus. So we've changed the effects a little bit. Now, none of these effects will work until we go down to the next tab on the right-hand side, which is the send. And that sends each part of the style, each sound, to the effects that are down here. So if I press the send, you will now see it's showing each part of the style. The part that we're working on has got a red bracket round it, the accompaniment one. And as you can see, effect 1, which is the reverb, is currently set to 0. And the reason that is set to 0 is because effect 3, which is this one down here, was, if you remember, the room reverb. But we've changed that now to chorus. Now, chorus is an effect that makes the sound a little bit thicker. Okay, so it takes a solo instrument and makes it sound as though there's more than one playing. And that's what I want to do with our French horns. So I'm going to, that's set to a value of 80. The largest value is 127. The smallest value is 0. So because that was set to 80, but that was going through a reverb, I'm going to leave that there, but that's now going to go through a chorus. But that means we now don't have any reverb. Well, effects 1, the one at the top, is our reverb. So I'm going to tap on that, and I'm going to turn that up. So we are up to probably 70. Okay, so now we have changed the fresh breath sound to French horns, and we've added chorus, and we've added reverb. So if we listen to that sound on its own now, that is absolutely fine. And if we put the rest of the style back by switching the solo button off, so that is a lovely sound, and it's a lot more mellow than when we had the fresh breath sound on there, and a lot more authentic for this style of music. So I'm only using, incidentally, variation 1, and I tend to stick to variation 1 because all I really want is a string bass and some French horns. I don't really want the other bits which come in, as I showed you earlier, on the later variations, but they are still there should you ever want to change them. But currently we're just bothered with variation 1. Now, a second change I want to make now, I want to go to the bass sound, which is movie strings 2. We're going to go to the big mixer again. If we have a look at the equalizer settings, you can see that the low frequency has been increased to +2, which is the factory setting. Well, I'm going to change that. I'm going to turn that up a little bit. I'm going to change that to +3, and I'm going to go to the high frequency, and I'm going to turn that down to -3. So that has just taken a little bit of treble off the bass sound and just added a little bit more. And I'm going to go back to the effect send, because if you notice on the send for the bass section, it's turned down fairly low. It's 28. I'm going to turn that up. I'm going to turn that up to 70. Okay, so now if we listen to our style, we've added some more reverb to the bass section. And just taken a bit of the treble out of that sound as well. So now we are really getting somewhere. And you could, if you wanted to, just save this style just as it is. So we'll do that now. I'm going to press the button top right hand side of the screen. Now, somebody once said to me, it looks a bit like a burger. Yeah, so that's become in what I call the burger icon. Okay, top right hand side. If you press that, one of the functions that you have is save style. So I'm going to press that. Now, it gives you the option of naming it. So I'm going to call this Orchestra FS Freestyle. There we go. And I'll press OK. And it's going to save that into the user bank. You could change that. You could save it to anywhere you want on the keyboard or even to a USB stick. But I'm going to just save it where it is. So there we go. So that sound is now saved. So if we, for example, go back to the original sound, now under the factory setting, which was the angel voice, once again, you can hear that fresh breath sound quite predominantly. If you go to the user section now and select the one that I've edited, it will sound quite different. And of course, you could use that then to play any of the style of music that I've been talking about. So, for example, a little bit of Ennio Morricone, Gabriel's oboe would sound like this. Let's just set that. Let me just pull this up from my memory stick. There we are. Or something like Schindler's List, for example. Yeah, so that style sounds lovely, and it can be used just like that. But if somebody wants to get even more technically involved, then we can take things one step further. Okay, so I'm going to call that sound up again. There we go, that style up again. Now, when you listen to an orchestra play, very often the bass line, which is played by double basses, and sometimes it's played by cellos, very often they play together. Okay, and you have the same notes played by the cello as the double bass, but of course the double bass will be playing an octave lower, so you're going to get octaves in the bass, which sounds really, really nice. Now, we're not getting that at the moment, but we can do. Okay, so I'm going to show you how you can take things one step further. Now, I'm just going to go to a sound for a moment on here because I want to play this for you. The sound that is being used for the bass is Movie Strings 2, which is this sound here. Which is a great sound and is working beautifully for the bass. But we have another sound on here called Studio Strings. Now, this is a very interesting sound because if you play from the middle of the keyboard upwards, you get a very nice string sound. But if you play in the lower half of the keyboard, it introduces double basses or contrabasses into the sound. Yeah, so you get a lovely, lovely deep double bass. And I thought, would it be possible to maybe have both sounds operating in the style? And the simple answer is yes, it is. So I'm going to show you now how you can do that. So for anybody who wants to take this style one stage further, then here we go. Because what we're going to do, I don't particularly want the soprano voice sound, which is in accompaniment 2. Don't really want that. I'm never going to use that. So what I can do, I can take what's happening in the bass track and I can copy that into accompaniment 2. And it's a fairly simple process to do. So what we do, we press on the panel the record edit button. And now the display will change to this. And you can see top left hand corner is style edit. If I press that, I'm going to be doing exactly what it says. I'm going to be editing the style. Now, we're not bothered about any of this because these are the basic settings that are making that style work. We don't want to change any of that. We want to leave that as it is. What we want to do is press the menu button. And now we have a different screen altogether. And on the right-hand side of the screen, we have a tab that says Style Edit. So I'm going to press that. And straight away, it goes to a section called Style Copy. And as you can see, you have a From section and a To section. And the way this is working, you can choose any part of the style and you can copy that to any other part or track of the style. Okay, now you can either do, because we've got 4 variations, we've got 3 intros, 3 endings and a break and 4 fill-ins. You can do each one of those individually should you want to, but the very simple way to do it is select that to all. And what we want to do now, in the To section, you'll see that that's also changed to all, so that's fine. Now, in the next tab along, we want to change that to the bass section, okay? Because we want to take the bass section and we want to copy that to the accompaniment 2 section. So I've taken the bass section from all elements of the style and I'm copying that to the accompaniment 2 section to all elements of the style. Leave the CV settings to all, because that means if you change that, it's going to change the way the style works, and we don't want that. We just want to literally copy the bass track from where it is to accompaniment track 2. I press execute. It's telling me the whole track will be copied, so you press yes, and then you can exit out of there. It's now asking you to save. So we're going to go back to my burger icon, save the style. We want to put it to where it came from. So just press save. It asks whether we want to overwrite. We say yes, and there we go. We can exit out of there now. And now if we look at the parts of the style, you'll see we've now got movie strings on the bass, but we've now also got movie strings on accompaniment 2 instead of the voice. The voice has gone, and so has the notes that the voice was doing. It's replaced it with the notes from the bass. Now, we are almost there, but not quite, because there is one other thing we need to change. So we're going to go back to record edit. We're going to go to style edit. We're going to go to menu. But this time, instead of style edit, because we've done that bit, what we want to do is go to this tab here on the top row, track type. And the reason we go into track type is because each track, each part of this can be either set to an accompaniment, or it can be set to guitar, or it can be set to become a drum, or it can set to become a bass. And it changes the way the style reacts when you play a chord. So it's important that because we want this to be a bass, we need to make sure that this accompaniment track 2, instead of being set to accompaniment, is actually set to bass, the same as the bass track. And that way it will behave in exactly the same way as the bass track. So once again, we're going to go to the burger icon. We're going to save that. So we make sure that we've got it all saved. Okay. And there we go. So what we have now, when I play the style, we're now going to have 2 bass lines. But, of course, they are both the same sound. And we don't want that at all. So we're going to go to accompaniment track 2, just like we did when we changed the vocal sound, the fresh breath sound, to French horns. We're going to tap the name or the picture. And we're going to change that to the next string sign down, which is studio strings, which are those that gave us the nice contrabasses. And now, when we press the chord, we will now hear the 2 bass lines playing together. And that's given us a much deeper orchestral bass sound. If I solo the actual bass line, that's more of a cello. If I solo the studio strings, we can hear those contrabasses down the bottom there. So if I now put the whole style back on, there we go. So I think that is a lovely orchestral bass sound that you could use for any style of music. As I say, you can use it for things like Gabriel's oboe. You could use that for. That would be really nice. So this. Or maybe, as I said before, Schindler's List, with the violin sound, all those sorts of things. Out of Africa would be lovely if we put some string sounds on. So it's a very, very versatile style. Okay, so the only other thing that you could do, maybe if you wanted to, is modify some of the volumes. So because we've got 2 bass tracks, you could make sure that you turn down the original bass track slightly. If they're both on 110, you may find that there's just a little bit too much bass. And also, the other 2 changes that I've made, I've turned down the drums and the percussion bits. Remember, they happen when you press a variation or a fill-in button, and again, they were a little bit loud, so I've just turned the volumes down to 80 and 90 on there, and therefore they just sit nicely in the background. So So that's better. So, yeah, so if you create that particular style, that orchestra freestyle, you can use that for lots and lots of different pieces of music. So that is it for the style part of this. What we're going to do now is move on to the next part, which will be the sounds themselves that we're actually going to play on the keyboard. So we've created, if you like, you can call that a style template, really. You've got that style that you can use for all sorts of different pieces of music. So in keeping with that now, we need to have a look at what sounds we're going to play on the keyboard. Okay. And again, I'm going to sort of set up, if you like, a template. And I'll show you what I mean, because I'm going to create one sound, and once you've created the first one, you can move on and very quickly modify that to different ones. So the first one I think we're going to do, the piece of music that I mentioned earlier, is Gabriel's Oboe. I said I like to do a lot of Ennio Morricone, famous of course for the spaghetti westerns, but also famous for the beautiful ballads, things, and of course Gabriel's Oboe is one of those. So what we're going to need obviously is an oboe sound, and we're going to want a nice sound for our left hand. So I'm going to consider the left hand sound first. Okay, so on our keyboard we want to make sure that we've got the lower section switched on, because that's where the left hand will be, and we want the split switched on. Okay, now the sound that I tend to use in the left hand is a sound from the string section on here, which is ballad orchestra. Now, once again, we're going to use the mixer, but of course, we're currently on the style section, so the page is showing us the settings for the style. We don't want that, so we're going to press this button here, and it's now changed to the pads and keyboard, and you can now see, if I go to the big mixer, you can see that it's now showing us each strip is assigned to the upper 1, upper 2, upper 3, lower, and then also the 4 pads. Okay, and if I go to the main section, so I want to make sure that lower is switched on, and I make sure that my split is switched on, because if you don't have the split switched on, even though you've got a lower sound, you won't hear it. Okay, so you need split on and you need the lower. And on here, I'm going to select from the string section. It's in the factory sounds. It's on page 1, ballad strings D and C. And that is a lovely, soft string sound for our left hand. Now I'm going to go through, remember we spoke about the tabs on the side. So the first tab we come to is the EQ. This was the tone control, remember? And if we look, the section we're working on is the lower. There is no EQ. Everything is set to 0. And the volume, as you can see, is 90, because you don't want the left hand sound to be too loud compared to the right hand. Okay, now again I'm going to bypass the insert effects. I'm going to go to the master effect. Now I said in the previous part of this, when we were discussing the style, that one of the really good things about the 5X is that you have 2 separate effects processors. Okay, and that is brilliant, because that means that the sounds don't have to go through the same effects as the style. And although sometimes that might be absolutely fine, sometimes it gives you the option to have different styles of effects on the sounds compared to what you have on the styles. So if we look at the settings here, the first one we come to is again reverb, but this is a Korg exclusive. It's something they call overb, and that is a different style of reverb. It's actually a diffusion based reverb, which sounds very technical, but it's very simple to operate. And rather than reverb times, you have sizes, decay amounts, and diffusion. And by playing about with these numbers, you can increase or decrease the amount of reverb that you hear. So I tend to have it set at these that you can see on the screen. You don't need to worry about what all of these mean. Just set them to what it says here. Pre-delay, these are set to 0. The size is 100. The decay, which is the time it will take the reverb to disappear. The bigger that number, the more reverb you're going to have. I set that to 62, and the diffusion amount is the smoothness of the reverb. Set that to 90. Okay, so that's the overb, and I find that the overb is a really, really nice setting. Okay, the next one down is chorus, stereo chorus, which we used before for those French horns. And the next one is another delay. Delay makes the sound sort of ping pong between the left and the right hand speakers. And again, the higher the settings, the more of this ping pong effect you're going to get. But it sounds really nice for solo sounds, and we'll be using that when we come to the right hand, but that won't be used in the left hand. Okay, and of course we have to come to the send bit again, because none of these will work until we tell it how much to send to the reverb effect. Now we're on the lower, we're concentrating on the lower, so as you can see, the chorus, which is effect 2, is 0. The delay is 0. We don't want delay or chorus on any of those, but we do want reverb, of course. That's set to 60. Okay, that's how I've set my reverb, to 60. If we go down to the next tab, tuning, this is where you can move things up and down an octave. Okay, now an octave on this keyboard is actually 12 semitones. That's the difference between a white key and a black key. Okay, there are 12 semitones in an octave. You will notice that the left hand is set to plus 12. And that is because if you have that set to 0, the left hand sound is going to be too low. Okay, so all left hand sounds are pretty much set to plus 12 on there. Okay, so there we have in the left hand a lovely ballad string sound. Now, we were talking about this, the piece of music, Gabriel's oboe. So we want the upper 1 section switched on. We don't want upper 2 or upper 3 because we want a solo instrument, 1 instrument on its own, and that's going to be an oboe. Now, if I click on here, this again is quite interesting because we have a whole load of factory sounds on here. These are the latest sounds on the Pa5X, and under Woodwind on page 2 we have some lovely oboe sounds. Okay, but sometimes it's nice to use legacy sounds. Now some people may think that legacy sounds, because they're from previous instruments, aren't as good, but in fact they are just as good quality, but they're just different. Now the standard oboe sound is lovely. Oboe 1 from the factory, that's a lovely sound, but I like to go to the legacy section and I like to use the classic oboe. Which I think is a really, really lovely sound. It's a little bit more mellow, and the vibrato on it is just a little bit faster. So that is a lovely sound. Okay, so I've chosen for what I want the classical oboe. Okay, now let's go down the mixer tabs again, we're going to go to the EQ section. Now, something that I do on lots of instruments, I call it my 3-2-1 setting. On the EQ, remember, this is the tone control. The treble I set to +3. The mid-range I set to +2. And the bass frequencies I set to +1. And I find that this just brightens and livens the sound up just a little bit. It sounds great without that, but I think it sounds even nicer with it. So I call it my 3-2-1 setting. And I don't use it on everything, but certainly for the oboe sound on here, I'm using that. You will notice if we look at the lower section, then there is no equalization, so there's no 3-2-1 setting on that, but there is on my right hand and on the upper one section. And you will see that the upper 2 and upper 3 are as well, because I'm going to show you what those are set to later. We're going to come to the master effects. We know what they are because we've discussed that, but we need to look at the send. You'll see that the send is 90, so that's adding quite a bit of reverb to the sound. And also, there's no chorus. We don't want chorus on an oboe, but we do want a nice little bit of delay. Okay. Now, if I come out of there and I go to the main section, the master section, I can switch off the various effects processors. So if I just listen to the effect, so this is the oboe completely without any effect at all. It sounds very dry. So let's just add the delay, and now let's just listen to what's happening. You should just hear that ping pong in between the two speakers. Yeah, not too much. Too much and it would spoil it just a little bit. And switch that off. I'm going to put the overb reverb on, and you can hear the reverb effect now. Put the two on together, and then you get the really nice combination of the delay and the reverb. Yeah, I'll switch the effects processor number 2 on, even though we're not using it at this point in time, but we may do later on. Okay, now tuning, then this is obviously completely optional for you. I've got my tuning for the upper one -12, and that is so I can come down fairly low. And because this is a 76 note keyboard, I can go high up the keyboard and I can get the high sounds as well. If you have a 61 note version, then it may be better to leave that set at 0, but that's something that you need to experiment with to see what suits your playing style the best. Okay, so what we now have, we have the classic oboe, we have the volume of 120, I've got the pan set to the right hand side, so it's coming very slightly right, because I always think it's nice for the for when you play in concert to have a bit of pan going on. The left hand is set to center and the volume is 90, and we've set the 3-2-1 effect on the equalization for the oboe, and none of that on the left hand. And we've set the reverb and we've set the delays. So the whole sound that we've got now is lovely. And if you combine that with the style that we had earlier, yeah, great sound. Now, I said that we were going to use this as a template because the next bit is easy. So first of all, we want to save. So just like we did with the style, burger icon, save keyboard set this time. And you have a choice. You can either save it to the style, or you can save it to the library. And if it's saved to the library, it means you can access it at any time you want. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to save it to the library. And by default, it's going to the user section. You don't have to do that. You can go to a USB stick or an SD card or to anywhere on the keyboard you want, but the user section is where it's going to go to. So I'm saving the orchestral oboe, as I've called it, to the library. Press save, and that's done. Okay. Now, I said you can use this as a template, because another really great thing on the Korg instruments is that if you change that oboe sound, it won't change any of the effects that have been set up on it. Now, some instruments it does. If you change, because the effects are built into the sound. And if you, for example, change that now, I mentioned Schindler's List earlier. If you wanted to change that to a violin, then on some instruments, all those effects would change and you'd have to do them all again. But we don't need to do that on here. I can go to there. I can, instead of the woodwind section, I want to go to the factory section, strings, and I'm going to go through to page 3. And again, one of my favourite violins, you've got loads and loads of violins. And again, there's a really good one in Legacy, but violin 4. But if you notice, we've still got the reverb, we've still got the delay. Yeah, so we don't need to set anything up. The left hand is exactly as it was. All we've done is change the oboe to a violin. So now we can play this. And of course, you could save that sound now as a different keyboard set, and now you've got an oboe and a violin, and it's done in seconds, very, very quickly. And of course, you can do the same with any other instrument on here. You could go back to woodwind, and you could choose a flute. Yeah, so very, very quickly you can use your template, your oboe template, to really create lots and lots of different sounds very, very quickly and simply. So that is a solo voices. Now, another couple of things I want to show you, and that is string sounds. Okay, now I'm going to switch upper 1 off, and I'm going to switch upper 2 and upper 3 on, because on Korg instruments you have lots and lots of fantastic string sounds, and I want to just very quickly show you what I do, for my string sounds. And of course, different people have different ideas, but this is what I do. So on upper 2, I'm using the same string sound as on the left hand, which is the ballad strings, which sounds like this. And again, if we go to our mixer and we have a little look what's happening on here, we've got the 3-2-1 on the EQ. The send for the reverb is 70. No send for chorus or delay, because we don't want that. And that is our ballad string sound. Now, there is another area of the keyboard that enables you to modify sounds, and I have mentioned this in a previous tutorial, and I'm sure it's been mentioned many times since, and that is a section called track controls, which we get to via the menu button. We press menu, track controls. Now, the first page shows you, well, first of all, it's showing you the upper 1, 2, 3, lower and 4 pads. And of course, if you press this button here, it changes to the style, because you can add the track control settings to all the style parts as well. But we want this on the upper section. And you can see that each part is set to poly. That means polyphonic. That means lots of different notes, which is fine. You can change it if you want to. You could change it to monophonic, which will only play one note. You can also change it to mono left, which means it will only play the bottom note, or you can change it to mono right, which means it will only play the top note. Okay, but that's set to poly, which is how we want it, because we want to play lots of different sounds, lots of different notes all at the same time. So we're not interested in the first page, not for what we want to do here. What we're interested in is the second one, which is sound edit. And this is the function I mentioned to you previously, which is release. The release is like a sustain sound. A bit like the damper pedal on the piano, or a sustain button on a traditional keyboard or organ. Now, we haven't got any on the flute, as you can see, because we don't want any. But on the ballad strings, we've got a little bit of release on there, which is 20. So that just adds a little bit of sustain. Not too much, just a little bit. Okay? So those are the settings for our ballad strings. Now, the next sound along is the upper three, and this is a legacy sound. If we go back to our mixer, you will see that this is real strings 2, which is in the legacy section. Again, nothing wrong with legacy sounds. And this, whereas the upper one, the ballad strings, is a very soft sound. Upper 3 is more of a thin sound. You can hear the bows on the on the strings from the violins and the violas. So it's a different sound altogether. Again, we can have a look at the settings. We've got my 3-2-1 setting on the EQs. The reverb is again sending at 70. Tuning is 0 for these. You will see on the very bottom here, you have a function called detune. And you will see that the upper one, the one string sound, is set to +1. And the next string sound is set to -1. This, it does it exactly what it says. It very a small amount of detune, which when you detune one sound up and one sound down just by a tiny little amount, it just broadens the sound and makes it sound a bit thicker and a bit nicer. And if we go to track controls and just have a look at what's happening on here, you will see that the release is on the real strings 2 is set to 30. So 20 on the ballad strings and 30 on there. Okay, so when we press the 2 together, upper 1 and 2, we're going to have both of those string sounds together, which is going to give us a really lovely string sound. Bring in that style again. So there we have lots of different solo instruments that you can create just by creating the one template. And there is an idea for you for strings. And one final thing, one sound that I use an awful lot, again in orchestral style music, are French horns. Okay, now the French horns, if we go to the brass section on here, we have a lovely setting called French section. Okay, now the French section sound is really nice, just as it is. I'm going to put these settings back to normal. Okay, I'll put those back to normal. So it's a lovely mellow sound. Perfect for chords. Again, that tune that I just played for you, that's Ravel's Pavan. Really lovely sound, nice and mellow and soft. But as with all brass instruments, string instruments, woodwind instruments, the way they are played makes a huge difference to the sound. Okay, and a player can make an instrument sound really soft and mellow, or they can make it sound really bright and raspy and resonant and powerful. And French horns can do all of that. So the standard sound is the lovely mellow one. But just think of, again, another tune that I play, the Out of Africa by John Barry, or think of the start of Chariots of Fire. Yeah, you've got this really powerful, resonant French horn sound, and that's not this sound. But you can make that very easily by using the mixer control. So I just want to show you this very quickly, and then we're at the end of this. And it's all to do with the EQ settings. Okay, so the standard EQ is 0. Now, normally with the sound, you wouldn't adjust the EQ very much up or down, because it would actually spoil the sound if you do it too much. But with this French horn sound, to get the sound that I want, I'm going to break those rules, and I'm going to take the mid-range and turn that right up to 18. That's the maximum that you can possibly have. Okay, and I'm going to take the high frequency, the treble control, and I'm going to turn that right down. So we've taken a lot of the top off of it, and we've increased the mid-range significantly. And let's just have a listen to the difference. So this is, let's just take those back off again. This is the standard sound. Imagine the start of Chariots of Fire. And now this is the modified version. Yeah, and very, very simple to do, just by altering the mid-range to +18 and taking the high frequency down to -5. So that sound is one that I use all the time. Again, if I put my my orchestral freestyle rhythm on, and I think of the start of Out of Africa, then we can do things like this. Yeah, so I think you will agree, well, I hope you agree, that that is a great sound, very easily to create. And of course, once you've done it, save it down as a keyboard set. So there we go, folks. So we have done, we have edited a style to create a style that's has got French horns and a double bass section in it rather than the original one, and I've shown you how to create a template for your right hand sounds, which you can then modify just by changing the instrument. And I've shown you a little trick there with the French horn. So that hopefully is giving you some really good ideas for playing things like John Barry and Ennio Morricone, which I play all the time in my shows. So there we go. So it's lovely to see you all, and I shall hand you back to Paul.
Steve, thank you so much for that. I'm sure our Pa5X viewers have found that interesting. Some really good hints and tips there on how you put all this registrations and setups together. And I'm sure we'll be seeing Steve on some future webinars. We might get him live one day, put him under pressure. It'll all be good fun. Yeah, all that remains is me to thank you as always for watching and supporting. If you have enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to our channel. It really, really helps us to continue bringing you this wonderful free content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all very, very soon.